Hello and welcome to The Fog of War, a weekly podcast where we discuss the work of journalists, media, and dissemination of information in times of conflict with academics, professionals, and journalists. Today it is me, Yaroslava Buchta, and in episode 5, I'm thrilled to be joined by Anna Gvarishvili, a Georgian journalist, editor, and head of investigative media lab, and Katya Tutberidze, a Georgian investigative journalist in Studio Monitoring. And first of all, I would like to extend thank you to our speakers, from me and from my co-host Jonathan Fink, who could not unfortunately join us today, for being with us here in such a decisive time for Georgian future. And it's extremely valuable to have with us those who actually shape the informational picture on the country. And I would like to start with a more general question, as in what stage are the protests in Georgia now? What's happening on the ground? What makes these protests different from other protests in Georgia, previous protests in previous years, and other events in the world that are happening within the same scale?
First of all, I would like to emphasize that these demonstrations are not led by the oppositional leaders. It has not one leader. It is led by and it is inspired by the idea, which is very important and valuable, I think, to protect sovereignty of Georgia and to protect Georgia's future. And Georgia's future has no alternative than to be in the Euro-Atlantic structures. And these demonstrations during all the days, in spite of brutality from this government, in spite of beating, arresting the activists, they can't stop it because it is led by the very important idea, and the leader is the civil society. This is very important. And I think the anger, what we are witnessing now, this legitimate anger, is answer to all these repressions, all of this brutality using by the government which can be called not just for these days. Georgia was called fragile democracy until the Russian law. We see this degradation of Georgian government. Unfortunately, when we were talking about the hybrid authoritarianism, the leaders in the West were talking about fragile democracy of Georgia. It wasn't fragile democracy, it was hybrid authoritarian regime. And now we are living in a classical, pure dystopian regime, authoritarian regime, where even the teenagers are kidnapped by the police forces, by riot police from the streets. And we are not moving to Russia. We are living in a regime which is a doppelganger of Putin's and Lukashenko's regime. The situation is quite dramatic. We are going through the hardest period in Georgia. But the sense, I think, the vibes are quite optimistic. And I think Anna would continue what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I completely agree with Katie. And first of all, thank you for dedicating this piece to Georgia. It's very important to spread the word. And thank you, Katie, for the introductory part. I also agree with Katie that it's the anger and broader spirit that is different in this protest. So that's what makes it different from all the other protests, because like there's a joke that we Georgians like to protest, like we go to protest a lot, but this time is different. I don't know if you've been monitoring and obtaining situation in the spring. We've been like the protests were more, I don't know, chill, I would say, relaxed. There was, I don't know, the fancy stages, there was long speeches, there was dancing, singing. It was very Georgian in a way, because like we're that kind of people. But after November 28th, the spirit that there is like pure anger, the legit anger of the people who are protesting against illegitimate government's decision to take away their European future. And that's what it is all about. It's about these protests are pro-European, anti-Russian. And like this is what drives Georgians, and this is what motivates Georgians most of all. Like you will never see Georgians in the streets protesting against corruption, or I don't know, other kinds of things that are being protested in other countries. All we ask from our government is just not to drag us back into Russian orbit. That's it. That's that's where our line goes. And unfortunately, Georgian Dream failed to meet even the basiest requirement of the Georgian people.
And if we're talking about, because you mentioned that the previous protests were more like chill, singing, there will be, well, given that I'm Ukrainian and to a greater extent, I think that I perceive it through because I was 16 when the Revolution of Dignity happened, and I do remember all of those protests there. And something that occurred back then was that after the EU agreement was failed to be signed, the protests were mainly like peaceful. So people were doing pretty much the same thing, just talking, chatting, standing there. But after the 30th of November, after the students were beaten and after Berkut was used for the first time, actually, I think this is when like it kind of escalated and then like on and then clashes with the police, and it was kind of like became irreversible like closer to February. So I guess my question is, what is it, this trigger that made this irreversible? Was it the fail to like the events of the 28th, or was it something else? Is there something else that kind of like makes it very different and makes it because you mentioned that this is different from what had happened before in Georgia and you feel it differently. So what makes it sort of, again, like I hope irreversible in the path towards democracy?
And so I think the main difference was it's not about the difference per se, but it's about if you've seen the events, it was like thousands of Georgians, tens of thousands of Georgians protesting during the spring. Then it was the opposition leader's decision was to just I don't know pause the protests and focus more on the elections that was held on October 26th. That was totally and completely rigged by Georgian Dream. And then there was, I don't know, it was followed by weaker protests. We like there was like less and less people within each day during the November after October 26 elections. And that was kind of nihilistic for those who were still protesting. But I knew as a fact that anger that triggered people in the streets during the spring would not go anywhere, and those people would just get more and more radicalized in their anger, and like at any moment anything could trigger them to go to the streets again. And that was the moment when de facto Prime Minister Gvarishvili declared that Georgia is suspending negotiations with European Union. So it's not about that statement per se. I think it's about everything that has happening during the last 12 years of their ruling. But this was like, I don't know, the final moment, final moment where people just realized that they had enough and they've given Georgian Dream all the time and all the chances in the world. So that's it. But when I talk about the anger, we should mention that Georgians are still protesting peacefully. We are not seeing violence from the protesters. It's the propaganda that tries to portray Georgian protests as violent, but it's not the case. It's totally peaceful, but it's just we're talking about the spirit of the people, actually.
I will continue. Thanks, Anna, that you described all the situation so briefly, and I agree with you. And I would like to add that till 2024, Georgian government was playing with two hands on two chessboards. One chessboard was for Russia and the states' so-called axis of evil, Iran, China, and Russia. And the other chess was playing and flirting with the Western powers. So after this, even till elections from the Russian law, when they passed Russian law, the most controversial law for the Georgia, they became openly anti-Western power. But after that day, November 28, they officially declared, even for their voters who were very naive and who were talking about we go to Europe with dignity. And they were talking about Europe, not EU. And now when they suspended and canceled all this integration process, all society is protesting because, first of all, it's about Georgian sovereignty. It's about the existence of Georgia, because Georgia, without partnership with the United States, without integration process with the EU and NATO, it's like a child left with the psychopath pedophiles. Literally, it's the same, because we are left in front of Russia. And who are our friends now? Iran and China, the states' axis of evil. So it's the question, literally, it's a question of existence, because all the recent decisions of the Georgian Dream, which is not legal government of Georgia nowadays, all their recent decisions jeopardize the sovereignty and existence of Georgia and Georgian citizens. And when they were talking in frames of their propaganda about this so-called conspiracy theory about global war party, they represent the global war party, because what they are doing now with the citizens, with the journalists, with the activists, this is war against their own people. That's why they reminded me in the recent days, Assad, when he was killing his own citizens for many years. And it's not sarin, but they are using chemical weapon against us. It almost killed me when I breathed it. It's really terrible. For the first several minutes, you think that you're dying. And thanks to doctors, I'm safe now. And because I have not asthma and I have not problems in my lungs, those who have it, they can be killed there.
Following up on this, actually, I have one of the questions from Jonathan is, what do you think about the reaction of the major geopolitical forces on the world arena? Because it seems like they're kind of failing to impose sanctions, they're failing to act promptly and react actually to the events that are going on in Georgia. It seems like UK only yesterday or the day before introduced some sort of limitations on their cooperation with Georgian government.
Yeah, I completely agree that they are our partners are being very slow, very outdated their means, because like after the elections, when we were protesting, when we were already protesting rigged elections, there were I don't know, statements and calls to withdraw the Russian laws. It was like it was not even a topic anymore, because like we were we were in a different kind of horror already. We entered like new level of electoral authoritarian regime. But the thing is that I don't think that we should rely much on the Western support at this point, because like we are seeing that they are being slow, they are taking their time, because there is, I don't know, diplomacy involved, there are many countries, there are interests, and, I don't know, there are many things going on. We should just keep going and keep protesting, because this is our country at the end of the day. I know that Georgian Dreams propaganda is trying to portray that we don't have any agency here. That was what about this whole Russian law on foreign agents, right? Because we're like vassals of United States, of European countries in Georgia, and we don't really care about Georgia, and we are doing everything what they are saying to us. But it's really not the case, because like you can see that it's been 12 days now. Georgians keep protesting in the streets and not having any kind of support, like actual support in hands from substantial support from the Western countries, not sanctions, not halting negotiations, nothing. We even seen that yesterday, unfortunately, European Union's ambassador to Georgia, Mr. Herchinsky, who usually has very good statements toward Georgian Dream, has met de facto Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mak Gvarishvili, and shaked hands with her after, well, I don't know, 12 days of torturing Georgians in the streets of Tbilisi. And I honestly think that we as a nation have to stop focusing so much about their support and about sanctions that will come or not. It's not clear at this point, and we should just continue do what we do, and to continue protesting against illegitimate, unconstitutional, pro-Kremlin and Kremlin-backed regime in Georgia.
I will add me as very pro-European and pro-Western citizen and journalist. I will also continue criticizing the EU and our Western partners. I remember headline from Bloomberg published in the beginning of May 2024, sanctioning, the headline was really great, amazing. Sanctioning one man can save the whole nation. And we're begging and we're talking and we're explaining, please sanction this man. It can save more than 3 million people in Georgia. It can save our relationship. It can save very important partner for the EU. Because I think even the footages from these demonstrations is enough to see that Georgian civil society is absolutely European society. I'm far from nationalism, but I think that we are part of Europe with our culture, and the civil society with its values is also. We have some problems with the discrimination, especially homophobic groups. But now we see that all those homophobic groups were boosted by the government. And I agree. I'm pretty sure in this, because for now they are doing the same these groups were doing, but they are doing it with more brutality, and because they own all the resources in this terrible system, they are using it against journalists, against civil society, against activists, and even against the juveniles. This is the most terrible part in this process, that they are arresting and beating teenagers. And it's really terrible when the European leaders are praising us, they are supporting us, but they do nothing. I have very close relationship with my colleagues from Caracas, from Venezuela, and they are talking the same terrible things about Maduro. If the United States sanctioned Maduro, why they are not sanctioning Gvarishvili? He is not better as Maduro. Why? Because we are very far from the US, because we have not rich petroleum resources, and because we are not speaking Spanish, I think they should help us. They should help us as the European, as part of Europe, as pure Eastern European country with very important history, with very important system and complex of values. We want to be liberal democracy. We know that it's very hard process to go through, but we long to have liberal democracy here.
Far-right groups, I just wanted to emphasize that part, that the state is doing right now what they've been doing with their proxy groups. We had this alt-right, openly pro-Russian groups called Altinfo, and other proxy groups who the regime would use against journalists and civil activists in Georgia. And we've seen, I don't know, pogrom of 2021, when more than 50 journalists were attacked in the streets of Tbilisi by this mob that was green-lighted and triggered by the regime and then Prime Minister Gvarishvili's statements that, like, holding Tbilisi Pride March was inappropriate for a country of our culture, something like that. But right now we're seeing that they don't need those proxy groups anymore. They are doing it themselves. They are attacking journalists on air, in the streets, in the center of Tbilisi by themselves. What we've seen in case of Guram Rogava, he was like speaking on air, he was in live, and the riot police officer just attacked him from behind, and he almost lost the ability to move his hands and legs. And it was like, I don't know, he got super lucky that he survived that, and he did not lost the ability to walk. And we are seeing those things are, I don't know, sanctioned by the regime right now.
This is something that you mentioned is like very important, because you are talking about this as a systemic phenomena rather than something that started only now as a reaction to protests.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
But
so
it was the ways we are more subtle and covered before that. They were not using those kind of measures because they were pretty smart about that, actually. As like the Katie already mentioned, they're playing two chess with two hands, and that's what they were doing about, like, keeping their lines blurry about Euro integration and Russia. But they were doing the same thing in all the criteria. It was not their authoritarian attitudes and acts were not seen, because it was really hard to see, because they were doing it in a subtle and covered ways.
This kind of provides the context that helps to understand the situation in way more nuanced way. So the question that I had was that what is going on with the coverage, and actually media coverage, including the coverage in the West, of what is going on in Georgia? Because something that happens with Ukraine and in relation to Ukraine is that, like all the people we interviewed here, they say that people just lack context. And again, coming back to propaganda, one of the reasons why propaganda, including Russian propaganda, works really well in the West, say, is because people simply lack context on what was happening, say, before the full-scale war or before the protests in Georgia, or like even I'm sure like how many know about 2008 events and what was going on back then, and that Georgia is partly occupied by Russia. So what do you think is going on in media, actually?
First of all, I see in the recent days many journalists from the European countries and freelancers also, especially from Baltic countries. And thanks to them, they are covering really very professionally. From Poland, I met a group from Poland, journalist group they are on air, they have live coverage and broadcasting all the events in live. But I think it's not enough. I had just one interview with BBC as journalist who is covering who is in the epicenter of this. It was just BBC dedicated 2 minutes to the events to Georgia. And I think it needs more because first of all, if we see it in a global puzzle, we see that the #1 terrorist on this planet, Russia, has war with Ukraine. Many Georgian citizens, Georgian volunteers, and also former soldiers are fighting in Ukraine. And all these hero guys, all of them are marginalized and demonized by the Georgian government. I think it's not surprise for Anna, you know, I think what they are talking about
sure.
this. This is also the part
There
of
is
propaganda.
there's this whole smear campaign from regime affiliated TV channels against Georgian Legion, for example.
Yes, and the other groups also, Caucasian Legion and Black Eagle and so on. I think that I would like to ask to my colleagues to cover more. I would like ask it to Western European countries because we think that Baltic and Central European countries are covering it. And I would like them to ask questions to the European leaders, why they are not sanctioning Bidzina Ivanishvili. He is not better than Deripaska or the other oligarchs. Even Deripaska is not killing my citizens, is not killing Georgian citizens. For me, Ivanishvili is a more dangerous monster, to say it metaphorically, than Deripaska for my country. They should sanction Ivanishvili. They should sanction all the business partners of Bidzina Ivanishvili and also the governmental, the leaders of Georgian Dream, so-called Georgian Dream, which is Putin's dream today, I would say. They should sanction them and their business partners to stop them killing, torturing Georgian citizens and killing Georgia's future. They should ask this question to the leaders, our colleagues from the Western media.
Yeah, I completely agree with Katie that the coverage of Georgia has been fragmental and it's mostly we're seeing, and it's of course understandable because as a journalist, I understand that people need, I don't know, beautiful footages and the pictures that draws the attention. And no, I don't know how many people in the West want to analyze Georgian very complex political, like local political dilemmas here. It's of course I wish to see more, but I also understand where is that coming from, and about the sanctioning Ivanishvili, I completely agree. It's just the man openly stated that all he cares about is his money. Like 2 weeks before the elections, he sat at the national TV, his regime affiliated TV Imedi, and he openly stated that I'm doing all this, like all this anti-Western rhetoric and etc. from coming from Georgian Dream leaders is happening because of my money. I want my money back. That was, I don't know, seized by some kind of legal case over Credit Suisse. That's a long story. So why not seizing his money that is in the Western banks? Why are we waiting? Why are we waiting when Ivanishvili will transfer that money to Georgia? Because right now he has new law in Georgia that allows him to transfer all his money from offshores to Georgia without getting taxed. And then there will be then he will do literally everything to stay in power forever, to save and secure his money. So time is running out and his money should be, I don't know, sanctioned he should face financial sanctions as soon as possible. That's the only thing in the world he cares about. He's not even pro-Russian ideologically. It's not like he likes Russia and he wants to live in Russia or etc. I'm sure he hates Russia. He doesn't want to live in Russia. None of his children want to live in Russia. He's citizen of France. His daughter is living in the United States. They want Russia for Georgians because that's the way I don't know, that's the way to manipulate the public and to weaken the society, to Georgian society. For himself, he wants European money, European citizenship, and all of them, all GD leaders, they are, I don't know, living their best lives in Europe while people of Georgia are being tortured for holding European Union's flag on in the streets of Tbilisi and other towns and cities of Georgia, and it's just not fair.
Do you think that Russian-Georgian relations as of like previous years with all the history of imperialism and Russian influence is overlooked in media, in Western media in particular, and the Russian influence over Georgia after the beginning of the full-scale war in Ukraine when Russians just rushed to Georgia as a kind of sanctuary? Is there enough attention paid to that?
No,
not definitely.
but again, it's understandable why, because in 2012, one of the main promises of Gvarishvili that was written in his, I don't know, pamphlet that he spread among society was that Georgia should not be the cause of conflict between the West and Russia. That was his, and for the past 12 years, Georgian Dream did everything to, I don't know, hide, and Georgia is not part of the discussions when it comes to Russia. They are speaking about Ukraine, and when it was, I don't know, Ukraine and Georgia as a I don't know, the this part of the same discussion, Georgia is excluded from those discussions from world leaders. We are seeing that for the past 12 years right now. It's been very strategical move from Georgian Dream. So it's understandable why it's not part of the Western media, because like Georgian Dream is not doing anything for Georgia to be, I don't know, mentioned in those kinds of discussions again alongside with Ukraine. What we do is I don't know, Georgian Dream is criticizing Ukraine and Ukrainian leaders, and we are seeing that. So it's again, it's not media's fault. I think it's not Western media's fault. It's the fault of Georgian Dream.
And maybe it's sometimes our fault we are not talking actively with our friends. I mean, the whole Georgian media. And I would like to add that one Georgian activist, to make it more clear for those who are not familiar with our situation, one Georgian activist, several years ago, he said, sometimes I think that Georgian citizens are the passengers of plane kidnapped by one psychopath guy. And it's the same here. And Anna was talking about very clearly that he said the only thing he's caring now is his money. In April, Georgian parliament passed a law about offshores. It will make a harbor, it will make paradise for Russian oligarchs, for dirty money, for black money, to hide it here. We have very beautiful, and I think it was very famous in Soviet Union, very famous city, it's Altubo. In 2019, Gvarishvili said that he's planning to rehabilitate this wonderful city. It's really very beautiful city. Sometimes I'm joking that if HBO knew about it, they would make film there, mystical thriller. It's really amazing. And now we are witnessing that it's one of the poorest cities in Imereti, in Western Georgia. we see the huge migration away from Georgia to the European countries, especially in Poland and in Germany and in Greece also. And we see that unemployment and poverty is growing in the whole country. And now I'm talking about Imereti and about Zaltubo. And we see that Georgian government is selling and selling to absolutely unknown legal entities, companies, these amazing buildings, these really very beautiful architectural masterpieces of Zaltubo to the companies registered in the offshore. You can find them on OCCRP base. You can find that there is not known who are the owners of all these companies. Bidzina Ivanishvili wants this country as his own company to share with the partners from Russia, from China, from Iran, from other non-democratic countries, maybe even from Hungary. They have also, that's why they have flirted with Mr. Orban.
Mm-hmm. And so you both work in investigative journalism. And this is the these are the primary topics that you work with. And I guess the question that I had is like, if you could talk a little bit more about what investigative media in Georgia are mainly focusing on, what the sphere is about, what's going on there now, because I mean, the information is changing, but also like it needs, so that the security challenges are always there because investigators mainly work against, against really high authorities. So if you could tell a little bit more about that.
Can I start? May I start? I will make just small correction that I'm a head of investigative media lab, but I'm not an investigative journalist myself, because we created this center at the University of Georgia because we wanted to help investigative journalism to get more viral among students and young journalists, because it's not really popular field in Georgia. And we see that, for example, Studio Monitor, where Katie works, and we have Studio Monitor that is amazing investigative media, but we also have iFact, who is also equally good. But these are two organizations that are focused on investigative journalism, and that's it. We don't have enough investigative journalists in country. Those who are brilliant, but it's not enough to cover all the corruption that Georgian Dream is conducting. So that was the main goal, to create this center at the University of Georgia. And I think that from the experience of what I'm working closely with investigative journalists, and I would like to share some insights. One is that the access to the public information is getting more and more limited each year and each month. One thing is that the regime is not proactively sharing the open information that should be available for all. But even after requesting that information, they are violating FOIA requests, because according to the law, they have 10 working days to give you the information. And after 10 days, sometimes they do this trick that they will ask you to clarify one question in, I don't know, in the second point or something like that. And they will have another 10 days. And you're not working for historical mana. You need that information now when you're working on the story. So it's extremely hard for not only for investigative journalists, but for journalists to access any kind of public information from the government agencies. And another thing we see is that I'm a lecturer at the University of Georgia, and I teach young students who wanted to be journalists when they past the university, but right now none of them wants to be investigative journalist because they are scared, and at least 50% of those who wanted to be journalists have changed their minds because of what they are seeing in the streets, because nobody wants to be a journalist anymore. It's not about the investigative journalism anymore. It's about nobody wants to be journalists in Georgia, because like you are underpaid, you are under threat, you are being, I don't know, attacked in the street, you are not safe, you are the main target, and yeah,
And you are demonized. You are
you're
demonized by the
yeah.
government.
And there is not enough, that we also should say this, there is not enough good media outlets where people would like to work after they graduate. Sorry, that was my small brief introduction.
Thank you. You described quite briefly and well, I think. So we are under the risk, first of all, because of Georgian government's propaganda and their supporters. And we have already mentioned Altinfo and the other proxy pro-Russian groups. They were also demonizing us with harmony with the government. So for about 40% of Georgian citizens were demonized. We are enemies of our country, but not for the majority. Fortunately, we are lucky in this. And I think you are under the risk. First of all, we are targeted by this Russian law. On the second, we are targeted by these brutal, unofficial groups. We call them also titushki, like in Ukraine, they were called. They are under the protection of government, and we are under the threat because we witnessed journalist of Tutberidze was attacked, and also cameramen, they were attacked, and it wasn't just clapping or something. They were attacked, their life, I don't know, something saved them in this process, because it was really very brutal attack, violent.
And it should be mentioned, I'm sorry, it should be mentioned that the attack happened, I don't know, 10 minutes after Tutberidze aired a journalist investigation into the special task force under MIA. That is the main organ that is responsible for crackdowns and tortures of citizens, and that was very significant that it was Magda Chikladze's investigation about that, and 10 minutes later she was attacked by these Titushki groups.
And she was broadcasting in live.
Wow.
Yes. So we were able to see it in live, this brutality and this violence. So first of all, you're under attack because of law. You're under the attack because of these groups, different groups, proxy pro-Russians, Zonder groups, and Titushki. You're under the attack by the government officials. You're under the attack and threat from police and riot police. You have no ability to get answer from the governmental structures and the press centers of the ministers. We are absolutely limited to get public information. This is the major problems. And yes, of course, the problem is also if government wants to, now they want to restrict masks on demonstrations. It means that we will not be able to wear masks and to cover when they are using this gas, pepper gas, and this toxic gas. This is the most toxic gas they ever used during the whole demonstrations. I think it's their aim. It's their aim to disappear independent media from Georgia, to disappear independent non-governmental organizations who are criticizing them and who are writing reports about their terrible activities and violation of the human rights and violation of the international ratified document they are violating. For example, when Georgian government in 2015, they ratified UN document about human rights. They are totally violating this document.
Mhm. And does the legislation allow for free media in Georgia, or is it also sort of closing up all the access to the information?
Legislation is good actually
Mhm.
if we are not considering this Russian law, but
Mhm.
like the legislation about freedom of expression and freedom to the information, they are mainly just translated. It was translated from American Constitution back during the past government. So they have not really changed that part yet, but they will change it too.
Mhm.
If we allow it, if we don't succeed in this final and decisive battle, then of course they will limit and restrict the freedom to assembly and freedom of expression as well.
We have quite democratic constitution if we expel the changes and amendments of this
Mhm.
ongoing year. It was quite democratic till 2024,
Mhm.
but the government was always ignoring, and especially now, the government is ignoring Georgian constitution.
Mhm. Mhm. And there are a lot of comparisons in media that are happening between, again, Georgian and Ukrainian context. And I mean, in my bubble, it goes up to like even this like yolk or like this tree thing that appeared in
Mm-hmm.
2014 already
14.
on, yeah, in at Euromaidan in the center of the city, and then the same thing happening in Georgia now. And it's kind of like how true or how good is this comparison to happen? In a sense that are we losing any details that make these contexts essentially different when you compare them? Because once again, I know as a journalist, you have to sort of build analogies for people to understand or
Mm-hmm.
connect things. But what are we losing when we're doing that?
This is very important question and topic, and thank you for very much for asking that. One thing is that I want to clarify that of course we admire Ukrainian fight, and of course we look at the revolution of dignity as an example of people's power, and that was amazing. And of course you can't
Mhm.
you can't refuse that there are many similarities between that and what is happening in Georgia right now. I understand where is that coming from, especially the pictures from, I don't know, the Christmas tree and this law again, the one that Katie was talking about wearing masks. I know that Verkot has done the same thing during Euromaidan protests, and they are doing, I don't know, it's really hard not to draw parallels when Georgian Dream is doing literally everything what Yanukovych did back then. And it's really ironic because they keep saying that Ivanishvili stated before the elections, Ivanishvili stated that I'm not Yanukovych, you can't conduct Euromaidan against me. And that's their biggest fear, to have a Euromaidan in the streets of Tbilisi, and yet they are doing everything from that playbook, like literally everything. They are, I don't know, I have a feeling that there's like the same guidebook, and they are just choosing parts, and it didn't work in Yanukovych's case, and I don't know why they think that it will work in their case, but I think that it's we're seeing authoritarian spiral right now. When you don't know what you're doing and you're just going with full in, and you're trying everything like different kinds of measures to repress the public protest. But we should also say that Georgians are naturally, culturally, strategically different from Ukrainians. It's not good or bad, it's just a fact. We are different kinds of people. So and I think that I'm sure that we will have our own unique voice in the whole process. It won't be the copycat of Ukrainians fight in 2014, because uh it's your story, it's your experience. It doesn't mean it doesn't have to be the same in Georgia. And I'm sure that there could be like other ways of dealing with Russian puppet regime than Euromaidan. Not that it's not bad or good. We're not talking about that, but it just we are kind of Georgians are different kinds of people. Like we have different spirit than Ukrainians, and I don't see Euromaidan happening in Georgia. I don't know. I don't see that.
Thank you, Anna. You described really wonderfully all this process. It's our story. Maidan was your amazing story. I was covering Maidan at the time. I was a foreign policy correspondent. And I remember when people were singing and then when people were crying, Prasipaysia, Kiev. And here we also say, wake up, Tbilisi. And Tbilisi, I think, is absolutely out from coma. We are
Yeah,
absolutely,
Tbilisi woke up.
yes, woke up, I think, and Kutaisi also, and Batumi also. Some small towns. I would like same to ask two wonderful people from Tel Aviv, because they are sleeping now, unfortunately. I think they will also wake up in recent days. And it's our story. It's the second chapter from Rose Revolution. I don't think that it's the continuing story of Maidan. I think it is the second chapter of very, very important Rose Revolution, which finally opened the window to Europe. And 2012 was important because Georgian government was changed because of brutality of the last years of Saakashvili's regime. It was also hybrid authoritarian. From the greatest reforms, he went to the brutality and violence. That's why it was changed. But he went from the power because of elections. It was very important. It is the major difference between Saakashvili and Gvarishvili.
Yeah, and I
Gvarishvili will
think
not
that was
go.
the
Yes.
biggest achievement of Rose Revolution, the biggest,
Yes, of course.
ironically, the biggest achievement of
Mhm.
Saakashvili's Rose Revolution, that the leader was Saakashvili, was the fact that he was re-elected, and it was the first time in independent Georgia when the government changed with elections.
So we're writing new book about the continued book about Rose Revolution, Georgian civil society, not Maidan, but what we can say is
Absolutely.
it's not the copycat of Balotnaya, because it was tragedy for the Russian people. I know some Russian dissident, they say it should be ended as Maidan, but we were not as brave as Ukrainian people. I think Georgian people are as brave as Ukrainian people. We have many different characteristics, but we are brave, and I think we will write the next chapter of the Rose Revolution.
That was perfectly put. Thank you.
Those are very powerful words. And yes, yeah. I guess my question about this, you mentioned that you've covered Euromaidan and now again what's going on in your country, and we talk on this channel a lot about proximity and emotions about journalistic coverage. And I guess I have two questions. Well, first, how has your perspective been changed, maybe if in any way, by the coverage of other revolutions, in particular the Revolution of Dignity in Ukraine? And the second one is, how is it to be covering protests in your own country and still remain objective? And does journalistic objectivity exist at all, even? Is it a thing?
After covering Maidan, I was always respected Ukrainian people. But after Maidan, I saw different face of Ukrainian people. And after that, Ukraine became one of my favorite countries. I have very special chemistry to Ukraine and Ukrainian people. And I think I'm not only one. You can find people like me, millions of people in Georgia with the same chemistry to Ukrainian people. And now I'm covering demonstrations with absolutely different vibes and with absolutely different chemistry to my country. I think, as I have already mentioned, this is another story. However, it's difficult when you're covering in your country and you hear on your own language how they are insulting you, how I mean riot police and special forces, how they are special forces of Ministry of Internal Affairs, not our army. Our army is not participating in this process. I would like to emphasize, and how they are insulting you, how they are beating you, how they are talking terrible things about your profession, about journalism in your own language. Because in Ukraine, we knew that they were just citizens of Ukraine, but mentality, they were Russian people. And now in Georgia, we see they are talking these terrible things in Georgia, and many of those guys who are in riot police, this is also a tragedy. They were fighting in war 2008. They were fighting against Russia, and now they are protecting pro-Russian government. Now they are protecting pro-Russian oligarch. And that's why citizens try to communicate with them. They try to bring on the sense of patriotism, sense of humanity. We are talking with them sometimes. For example, I took off my press card, and as citizen, I asked them, you were fighting alongside with Georgian, who is hero for us, who was iconic figure for Yashka Tsigangov, who is also hero for Ukrainian people. And we're talking about our heroes, Shindisi heroes. You guys, you were fighting with them. What's going on now? Why are you beating us for one man, for one pro-Russian oligarch? And I remember very young girl was talking about through the tears. She said, my father was soldier. He died in this war. You were fighting with them, and now you're beating me. Now you are trying to arrest me. This is tragedy. Bidzina Ivanishvili touched everything he could destroy, and he destroyed everything he touched. This is tragedy. About riot, I would like to say it about our riot police.
But what do they reply? Is it just the learned phrases from the propaganda, or is it something kind of more personal?
They're not replying.
Yes.
They are not coming into any kind of communication. They really act like Robocops, like robots, who are determined to disperse you, to crack you down. So I don't think it's, of course, I appreciate the tryings, but I don't think that it will work out. Like it doesn't matter. They are obeying the rule, and they are doing whatever the order is. Unfortunately, that's it. And that's why I think that if people win this process, we will have to rebuild the whole country. We will have to see the birth of new Third Republic of Georgia, and we will have to build everything from scratch, including police, including special forces, including Secret Service Agency, I don't know, including Minister of Internal Affairs. This whole system is dismantled, and we need to build them again.
And what do you think will be like the three, say, top priorities in this reconstruction?
First of all, law enforcement structures, rebuilding them, because they are the main source of repression used by any government of Georgia, and like that should be totally collapsed and rebuild it. Second is I don't know,
Take Georgia back to the
withdrawing,
Western orbit, I think.
of course,
Mhm.
and withdrawing all the laws that was adopted by Georgian Dream in the past 2 years, be it the law on foreign agents, offshores law, anti-LGBTQ law, and I don't know, other parts of the constitution that should be. And we definitely need to rewrite the whole criminal code, because like this it should not be like we have this terrible laws coming from the Soviet history, that there are people arresting for petty hooliganism and not obeying to the police's I don't know, lawful order, and that is absolutely super broad term and could be referred to many things, and it's being used as a tool for the repression of the demonstrators and protesters. And we should totally rewrite the criminal code, because it's crazy that I don't know, for a small part of, I don't know, some kind of club drugs, people can be sentenced for a life term. And for the rape, the maximum number of, I don't know, the sentence is 9 years, and it's just not right.
Mhm.
That's insane, really.
And yeah.
Many laws should be changed, I
Mhm.
think.
And is the full deoccupation of the country's territory on agenda, or is it not something being currently discussed?
I think the occupation of Georgian territories is dependent on the epilogue of war in Ukraine, because it's said that when Georgian citizens, Georgian volunteers and Georgian soldiers are fighting in Ukraine, that's why they say, and I absolutely agree with them. This is also our war.
Unfortunately, I agree with that, and unfortunately, the topic of occupation of our occupied territories is really complex, and it's not totally up to Georgia, and we're totally waiting on the geopolitical maneuvers of other countries.
And talking about geopolitics, I have actually another question from Jonathan. He wanted to ask about the role of Georgian president, and recently she mentioned that she met with Trump in Paris at the opening of the cathedral. So could you just comment a little bit maybe on that?
Yeah, so Georgia Dream's propaganda tries to portray Trump as their guy. That's what they are saying, that Trump is our guy, and we don't care about the ruined relations with United States, because Trump will come in January. Trump will take office in January, and will reload our relationships with the United States, and we won't have any kind of problem in terms of strategic partnership with the United States. But that's of course lies, because everyone knows that first of all, Trump is really keen on China, and Georgian Dream's government has close ties with China and Chinese companies, and that's something we should, I don't know, paddle on for Trump's administration. And we see the Republican senators and congressmen that are openly against Georgian Dream, and they were always more anti-Russian, I would say, than a democratic representatives. So I don't think that the Georgian Dream anticipation of Trump's administration will be, I don't know, beneficial for them, because with that meeting was really funny, because while they were bragging, Irakli Zarkua is one of the leaders of Georgian Dream, and he one day he even said, "Oh, don't make me call Trump now." And Salome Zurabishvili just casually went in Notre Dame and met with Trump and shake hands, and I'm betting they are super annoyed by that fact.
Mhm. And Kati, you wanted to add something?
She said everything
Yeah.
I would like to say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we are actually coming to the end. So I guess my last question would be, what advice maybe would you give to those documenting and reporting on the events on Georgia as in the West, and maybe as in Western journalists and people who actually are following the events? What could you say in this context that is like the main takeout that you take away? It's the main thing that you should know, and the main thing you should pay attention to. Yeah.
First of
I
all,
will have
good
really
question.
brief advice. Sorry, go.
Yes, I will say very shortly and briefly. First, I have already mentioned give questions to the Western leaders and also members of the European Parliament about sanctions. Also, I would ask them to dig in a history between Georgia and Russia, and to dig, I would like to ask to investigative journalists from the Western countries, please dig in the in black and dark business of Bidzina Ivanishvili that I'm sure he has in different countries, in Latin American countries that we are not able to find. I would like to ask them, dig in his dark past, dig in his business. And also I would like to ask them that to cover more frequently Georgian events, but I think that they are covering, but cover more and more on, don't be tired with this. I would like to ask them, and always focus also on human rights, because it's very important.
I agree with Katie, and I only have to add one thing. Please, please select your respondents more carefully, because I'm not gonna add anything on this, but just please do more research before talking to people, because that whoever you choose to interview will define the whole country and the whole protest and the whole process. So do it carefully, please.
Thank you very much. I'm
Thanks.
actually, yeah, I'm happy to have you as here as voices on talking on behalf of Georgia on this channel. In this podcast. No, it's very important, and again, like to me as a Ukrainian, hearing you, it's really inspiring, it's really great, and I wish you all the strength and all the, well, I would say luck, but all the good things to happen to lead finally to where Georgia wants to be as liberal and democratic country, as a part of like developed democratic world. And
Thank you so much, and victory to Ukraine.
thank you
Like
so much.
your winning means our winning, and vice versa.
Yes, and to our listeners, to everyone who has been with us today, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with someone who might find it interesting. Please leave your questions in the comments. We might follow up with our speakers if you have any. You can also follow us on social media for updates, for extra context. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next week for the next episodes.